Hello and welcome everyone to today's Chat and Learn at Power to Fly. My name is Hunter. My pronouns are he, they, and I am a moderator and events host here at Power to Fly. We're so glad to have you here. And so first up, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping just to sort of touch on what this next hour is going to look like. So know that you can participate. You can turn your cameras on. It's a great way to connect with our speakers today. Two amazing people that have so much insight to share with you. And I'm very, very excited to be talking to these two powerful people. So no need to be Instagram ready. You can just turn that camera on, pop your collar, you're ready to go. We're just hanging out and talking here. Know that we are recording this. So if you do turn your camera on, you may pop up in the recording. And we're going to send a link out in the next few days so that you can rewatch this or share this if you like. And you can check out this chat and other chats at Power to Fly or PTF Chat and Learns on our YouTube channel. There's so many awesome resources, including other talks with Devon and Rachel, who I'm very excited to introduce in just a moment. And know that you can write in the chat. We love participation here at Power to Fly. So if you go over to the chat section, you can ask questions publicly, and please be mindful that this is a shared space so that we are inclusive of all language and creating an environment where we all feel comfortable to share and ask questions. If you do want to ask anything anonymously, you can go over to my name, Hunter, and then select me, and then you can send me a direct message, which I'm happy to ask on your behalf. Or if there's any concerns that come up, you can message me and I will take a look and hopefully resolve that as quickly and smoothly as possible. And without further ado, feel free to hashtag and at Power to Fly, all the things on all the social medias. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce one of our two speakers. So we have Rachel Serwetz, who is an early professional experience, was at Goldman Sachs in operations and at Bridgewater Associates in HR. From there, she was trained as a coach at NYU and became a certified coach through the International Coach Federation. So official sounding. I love it. She worked in HR research at Aon Hewitt and attained her technology MBA at NYU Stern. Throughout her career, she has helped hundreds of professionals, I would say thousands at this point, Rachel, because you're here all the time helping so many people on the call. And with their career exploration. And for the past 5 years, she has been building her company, Woken, which is an online career exploration platform to coach professionals through the process of clarifying their ideal job and career path. So awesome. And we also have Devon Climer here today, is a corporate speech trainer, workplace communication specialist, and certified speech pathologist. She partners with individuals and organizations across industries to improve executive presence, boost team morale, and alleviate productivity all via clear, effective communication skills. Blending her extensive academic training with her real-world experience navigating a professional life, Devon is passionate about connecting the art and science of communication because it's both in her work. I love an exclamation point. Okay, friends, so please welcome Rachel and Devon. Hello, how are you two today?
We're good. Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
So great to have you. So before we kick off into questions, and just to remind the folks on the call, the way this works is we have a list of pre-submitted questions that a lot of y'all submitted in advance. So thank you so much. We've compiled that. We're going to go down that list. There's some awesome questions. Thank you for doing that. And if you have any questions that come up over the next hour of the chat, drop it in the chat and we will do that as well. So before we kick off into questions, Devon, would you like to share with us a bit about your career journey? I read some of your bio here, but I'm sure there's things I've missed. So I'd love to hear a little bit about where Devon Climer came from and where she's at today.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. So like, my bio said, I'm a speech pathologist. That's, kind of where my training is from. I have a master's in communication sciences. And, throughout my graduate work, I was working in a speech science lab. So I am very, I'm well versed in the science of the communication process. And, after I graduated, I took a very traditional path in my career. I started working as a clinician, as a hospital speech pathologist. And, it was there. And then when I really started to learn, like, wow, communication truly, I know the science of it, but there is such an art to it as well. And, just learning how to navigate for the first time a professional job and, dealing with difficult, work situations and things like that. It was tough to navigate as, an entry level young professional. So I, did that for a good while. And, during my time in the hospital, I was, started to be asked by, physicians to give in services to medical students and nurses about how to communicate effectively as a team, or how to deliver, difficult news to patients, things like that. So that's kind of what got me into what I am doing now, doing corporate speech training. It's a very niche area of the speech therapy field, but it's growing. And I now have a business called My Communicoach, and I do, coaching through that and workshops and courses and things of that nature. So it's kind of cool just how, I've kind of morphed from the clinical field to what I'm doing now, and I love it.
I love that. My Communicoach. What a great name. That just
Thank
rolls
you
off the
so
tongue.
much.
I
I
love it.
know,
I
I
get
was
it.
so surprised the trademark was still available. I was like, what? So yeah, I love it too. Thank you.
Yeah, that's so great. Oh, I love that too. Yeah, when you're like, oh, no one has thought of this. Well, there must be a need.
Yeah, that's right. There we go.
Thank you, Devin.
Yeah.
Rachel, how you doing today?
Good, good, good. Thanks.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to share a bit before we jump into our topics and questions?
I mean, I could share a lot of different things, but tell me,
I mean, a bit about you and your career
Sure.
journey. Anything I missed from the bio,
Yeah, in a nutshell, I started out in the corporate world. I was informally doing career coaching on the side of my job for several years, and I was also trying to figure out my own career path. I received career coaching and then got coaching training. So all along the way, I was trying to think about how does somebody figure out what it is they really want to do in their career, and then really honed in some processes around that. And now basically I help people with career path exploration, making upskilling decisions, personal branding, materials, editing that, strengthening your brand, job searching, networking, interviewing, as well as just career in general. So yeah, networking is obviously such a big topic. I know that's what we're talking about today, but that's a little bit of kind of what I do.
I love that. Thank you, Rachel. So let's jump into it, friends. So we're talking about networking, leveling up our skills, becoming confident. So let's zoom out for a sec and let's just talk about, how do I figure out my broader purpose for networking?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it's important to, figure out and really reflect on what it is that your goals are, coming in and being intentional about why it is that you're networking is really important to steer, kind of what it is that you're doing, who you're talking with. It kind of just sets the tone for everything. So I think coming in and just being clear about your goals and what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then I'm sure Rachel can elaborate on that too.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would think about it is, you can network either for, like, I call it career path exploration. You can call it whatever you want, whether it's an informational chat. But if you are trying to learn about certain roles, or learn about certain industries, or learn about certain organizations, or learn about certain career paths, there is an element of networking that is purely for the, gaining an understanding and reflecting on what path is the best fit for you. That is one reason to network. Another reason is when you are job searching, if you're actively exploring openings and opportunities and you want to uncover where those opportunities are, that could be another purpose. However, even when you're doing that, I still like to angle it or approach it as a learning call, because with job search, you don't necessarily want to be always so forthright about just like, I am just looking for jobs. It's like, what can you do during job search to meet people and get your foot in the door? You can learn from them. So setting up an exploratory call, an informational call, asking someone questions about their role, how this role works at other companies. There's so many things you can ask. The exploratory nature of a networking call and the learning orientation is usually like a great way of doing it. Another reason you might be networking is maybe you're debating upskilling opportunities. Maybe you're debating any sort of learning program, whether it's a boot camp, a course, a certification. Really great to talk with people who have done that before, done that program, or who are just in the roles that you're looking for, so that you can see what sort of training opportunities are worth my time. There's probably other reasons for networking that, if I were to keep brainstorming, but the bottom line is, don't just network because you think you're supposed to. So many people just like, when you send out your initial ask for networking, like I find a lot of people make it so broad because they are not sure what they want out of it. So really ask yourself, why am I doing this? Who am I reaching out to? And what is it I need out of this? And if you're not sure, get help. Like whether it's Devon or me or Hunter or whoever, maybe even it's a peer from Power to Fly, where you're just like riffing with a peer and you're actually just figuring it out together. But just be really thoughtful to understand your why before you reach out to anyone and before you do any networking, right? So that's, does that make sense? I hope.
Absolutely makes sense.
For
And
sure.
and you transitioned like so perfectly in the next topic. It's like figuring out who to network with, because we're really focused on the why, but you can only know who if you know the why, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say most people are missing with networking? Is it setting goals, intentions, the purpose? Or are there some major blind spots that y'all have noticed that are common mistakes when networking or when not networking?
Yeah. I think Rachel kind of touched on that, just, really stressing being intentional with your networking. And, especially, coming from what I do from the communication piece, I think, being intentional and authentic is so important when you are networking. And, sometimes that's, an area that people just kind of miss the mark on a little bit. You're feeling nervous and, are trying to fit maybe a different mold or something, but being your authentic, kind of genuine self is definitely an essential. And, what I tell a lot of people is really with any communication interaction, and especially with networking, I think being curious and, just genuinely inquisitive with other people goes a long way and helps to kind of create that natural connection that people remember. And, then they think of you in other, down the road, or, new opportunities, things like that. So I think having that genuine curiosity and willingness to create a connection is, can be something that just takes practice, but it can go a long way when thinking about interacting during networking types of conversations.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like, I think people will hop on the phone and then like ask things they think they're supposed to ask, instead of asking yourself and actually reflecting and saying, what is it I'm not sure of? What is it I don't know? What is it I'm concerned about? What is it I'm actually maybe struggling with? Maybe you've been doing some efforts and it's not working, or maybe you're not sure which role is the best fit for you, or, just doing the actual, in order to be authentic, it's like, you got to reflect on where do I even need help? Like, what do I know? What do I not know? What do I need information on? Do I need stories, perspective? Do I need examples? Do I need any level of information? And list out the questions that are genuinely on your mind, and like, know that it's okay to let them meet you where you're at, because the truest, authentic questions is going to get you the best source of information and help. And like Devon said, they're going to resonate if they feel like they're actually helping you. They're going to like want to help you. So don't feel like you're giving like a bad impression if you're, asking things of like something you don't know or something you want to know more about. They're going to be impressed by the fact that you're being so thoughtful with the due diligence of what you're even asking at all. And so the more thoughtful and authentic, they're going to say, you know what, we're both using our time wisely right now because I'm actually helping you. And that's what they want. So let them meet you where you're at. Be honest with your questions. Hunter, you said, what do people miss? I mean, I think you also mentioned like, what are people doing when they're networking or not networking? I think some people are also just hesitant in general to even start the journey. So, get support around that. Like, how can you get comfortable and confident, which is why we're talking about this today, but trying to allow yourself to even get support as to the idea of networking if it's something you're not even sure how to start. Like, we're talking about how to do it well, but also how to even get yourself to the point of readiness and ripping the Band-Aid off. Yeah. And then, you did mention the who too. So just like super quickly on who to network with, it obviously relates to your why, but I'm just going to throw out some food for thought for people in the audience just to touch on that who question. The way I like to think about networking is like, we're often assuming of who our network may know. So, be unassuming and really be clear in who you want an introduction to, but your family, your friends, your acquaintances, past colleagues, any social organization or something you're a part of, these are people in your life who may be able to connect you. And then alumni networks, if you attended, even whether it's an undergrad program or any alumni of any program or anything you've ever been a part of, even if it's your high school, alumni networks can be so powerful. It's such a large group of people where you can really find who you need and you have something in common. So I love that. And then you can also just look at LinkedIn is such an amazing research tool in terms of like, who do I have a mutual connection with, right? Maybe there's someone you want to meet and you happen to know someone who knows someone. So really play around with being open-minded, being creative, and yet you can still have a clear, specific ask, but all the different avenues as to, how can you reach the right people? That's where you want to be open-minded with the who question.
I love that. There's so much in both of what you just shared. I love connecting the who and the why and the authenticity that you're sharing with going beyond our scope of assumption of what our network is and is capable of. Also, Devon, I love when you're saying, maybe this first call, that might not get you the job or a job right away, but down the line, it might be something, right?
Sure.
I come from a performance background, so actors are very used to auditions and stuff like that. And I had a casting director say to me once, who's a advocate of mine, and I really appreciate him. He said, Hunter, you're always auditioning for your next audition. And I think that applies here in the business too, when you're in the business of networking.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
So we were talking about, we want to be very clarity as well, which is very important. And so we want to make sure that we are asking thoughtful questions, but how do we cook up these thoughtful questions for, networking calls, whether it be exploratory or expanding our network?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in preparation and, kind of doing your research and, just kind of putting the time into understanding and knowing who you're speaking with. That is the best way to, be informed and ask questions that really have to kind of, like Rachel was saying, help the person help you. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to go in prepared and, to have a sense of what it is and, what the kind of conversation that you're hoping hoping to get out of it. And then, too, just from, my perspective from the communication piece, I think when it comes to asking questions too, it also involves very good active listening skills. So, it's important to help that guide your conversation too. And if you get kind of off track and not really going off of your list of questions, that's okay. Use your listening skills and help, mold the conversation in the natural way that it's going. And then certainly if if there's some specific thing you really want to touch on, kind of, gear it towards that way, to get back on track. But active listening goes a long way in terms of being able to form thoughtful, connecting questions that someone will really resonate with.
Yeah, when I think about asking good questions, I think about creative, concrete, and comprehensive. I think there's, like Devon said, power in preparation, like literally wordsmithing. How can I ask this question as clearly as humanly possible? And spending 10, 20, 30 minutes just figuring out what are the 5 or 10 questions I want to ask. And literally, like, there's just so many different ways of phrasing the same thing. And you may want to ask them about their experience. You may want to ask them about what they've seen, like in their role or in previous roles. You may want to ask them about what they've seen in other interviews. You may want to ask about other teams that they have exposure to. There's so many angles that you could ask it. So like where you can have sort of that power is the prep of, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to get at? And what is the clearest way I can ask it? And sometimes in the moment, if you're not clear or you don't get the answer you want, ask that same thing a different way to be empathetic as to, am I being clear? Did they answer it? Or do I need to switch up how I'm phrasing something? Being creative, concrete, and clear. I think when we don't know what we want to ask, sometimes it gets broad, it gets vague, it gets foggy and fuzzy. But when you really sit there and combine the reflection with how do I phrase this out really well, it's so much more powerful than you might think. Like, what are the words that are going to be the clearest way for you to, because when you start preparing the questions, you're literally going to be asking yourself, what is it I'm actually trying to ask? And you're going to work through that. Like, for example, instead of like, what's the culture? That's just such a broad question. Like, they could be really fluffy in their answer. But if you want to ask yourself, here's what I value in a culture. I value being empowered in my workplace to bring up new ideas. You could say to them, like, tell me about a time when someone on your team brought up some new suggestion and how did that go? They may tell you some story that there's a project that's in the backlog for the last year, or they may say, yeah, Jane suggested this thing yesterday and now she's running with this whole new process and a whole new thing, or somewhere in the middle. But when you get concrete examples and stories, because that's what you asked for, you're going to understand how that team may exhibit a culture trait or not. And that's just one example. There's so many different types of questions you can ask, but you want to, think about, am I trying to understand this person's experience, or maybe their knowledge of certain patterns of how does this typically get done? What are the trends? What are the commonalities? Or do I just want to understand their personal experience? So many different angles and so many different ways of phrasing things. So don't skimp on that time to just sit with yourself and like workshop it to see what would be the best. But then, like Devon said, you want to stay in the moment. So if you hear something, ask more about it, but you also have your list at the ready as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Concrete, clear, comprehensive. I also heard the power of preparation in there. That's fantastic. And I also, when you were talking about, Rachel, your values and how when we get in touch with our values, that can be the root of some of these creative questions that are really important, right? Instead of just like, oh, this kind of wishy-washy stuff. But when we really get in touch with our own values, then we can do the barometer test with these creative questions and see how they're reflected at these potential conversations, whether it be future employer or just someone you're hoping to connect with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Devon, I love too when you were talking about active listening, I think is very important. And if I'm going to put on my little actor hat again, it's a dialogue, not a monologue.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yes, it's so important. I think it's, really one of the skills that's just so essential for good leadership. And I think it goes such a long way for sure.
Absolutely. So when we want to bring authenticity, this is, I would say, a bit of a buzzword right now, bringing our authentic selves to work, which is, of course, something we want to do. And I think it's an amazing opportunity that we're getting to do in a lot of different formats now. So how do we bring authenticity into our professional networking? I'm sure there must be a fine line between sharing personal information and staying on track to what the goal is. Rachel, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of it because you want to be authentic with why am I doing this? Who would be the most helpful? What should I say? What is it I need to really ask, and being honest with yourself and thus being honest with other people in what you ask. So the authenticity comes throughout the entire journey. And then when you show up in the moment, I think it's a bit of comfort and confidence to remember that you can be yourself. It's okay not to know. You're literally there to learn, and you're there to ask questions. So that takes some getting comfortable with that idea, knowing that it's totally okay to be yourself. I'm trying to think if there's an element of the networking that we missed in terms of the authenticity, but really, I think it comes down to just knowing that there's nothing wrong with where you are right now. And if there's things you don't know and need to know, that's why they're happy to help you. And this is why people want to help. They want to give you that information. They're going to see that that's the best use of everyone's time, is that you had a clear ask and you're getting value out of it. And like I said, it's more impressive that you're being thoughtful in what it is that you ask. They're actually going to be impressed by that. So don't hold back. Don't force it. If you're asking things that don't really feel worthwhile to you or authentic to you, they're going to sort of see that. And so it's most effective to you and easiest and really most valuable to be authentic. It actually just all works in your favor. But sometimes we have any number of hesitations that are very valid and common with networking. So just tap into how you're feeling and see if you can get support. It's not you're just going to feel confident right away. Sometimes it takes a journey. You might want to work with a coach, a mentor, a peer, and just get comfortable over time with how to show up as yourself. And I think, when you mention personal questions, you never really need to share anything you're not comfortable to share. I mean, we'll just say that. But, if there's personal things you want to get to know, if someone was starting a family in this job, how did they handle that? If there's a personal question that you're not sure how to bring up, or if they want to even talk about it, you can always just say, are you comfortable to touch on this topic or something like that? You can ask for permission. But there's very rare times that something is in a professional setting, something you need to know for your professional journey that would be off limits. If someone's already offering to chat with you, usually these are all very relevant topics. And you can always just ask if you're not sure whether they want to touch on it. Yeah. And I think too, something personal can be, we talk about diversity and inclusion. Did you feel, included and treated fairly? I would just, with things like that, if you're in an interview or networking and you want to understand the culture and whether it's truly inclusive, you want to actually think about examples. Again, being concrete. Did you feel comfortable to share your ideas? When you shared your ideas, how did that go? Or other examples of how and when you would, what could exhibit inclusivity, and trying to get examples and stories so that you really can understand the environment. If you're trying to learn about a company in an environment, those are ways that you can, it's personal and it's important and it's sensitive, but you can try to just get, real examples that will show versus tell, so that you can actually form your own opinion about things, right? By way of the information you're getting. You want to ask yourself, do I want to ask this person's opinion and advice, or do I want to get some information and examples and then form my own opinion, right?
I love that. So much helpful stuff in there. And that's talking about authenticity. And also, you mentioned some ways of building up confidence as well with working a coach, perhaps. And Devon, would you like to speak on that, perhaps? As no pun intended there.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I think, not feeling super confident when communicating is something that is so common. And there are lots of ways to help, boost your confidence in these types of situations. I came across a quote. I forget who said it, but it's something along the lines of, and this applies to really all, whether it's networking, interviewing, public speaking, but it's something along the lines of every time you speak with someone is public speaking, whether it's to one person or 1,000. And I love that because I think it just kind of takes the drama down that we might have in our heads surrounding, these types of communication scenarios that make us super nervous. So I think if you think of any type of speaking scenario as public speaking, that helps a lot of people. And then start using, everyday normal scenarios as opportunities to improve your communication. And that'll really help with your confidence too. And, too, I think one area that helps so much with confidence is really becoming in tune with what's going on in your body and, learning tricks and ways to kind of how to calm those nerves and help you feel more confident. So I think the more you're in tune with, the fact that maybe when you are nervous, your heart starts pumping and you may feel a little sweaty and things like that, that's okay. And just recognizing it and, saying, oh, like, that's just me, that's just my body. It's okay. And kind of taking a lot of the big feelings around it. I found that really helps people, in the moment feel more confident in these types of situations. And then, also too, and this kind of goes back to the authenticity piece as well, but it helps with confidence too. I think when you're telling stories and talking about things that light you up, you're just naturally there's more dynamics, there's more personality involved, and that helps calm you down. It kind of helps you feel, at ease when you're speaking about something that you're really passionate about and that very well. That is so helpful. And I think the more positive, types of interactions you have, the more confident you'll feel. So I think, just really using opportunities to practice goes so far for confidence when it comes to these types of things.
Oh my gosh, so much amazing stuff in there. You got a shout out in the chat too. I like that. You're public speaking every time you're speaking to whether it's one person or 1,000 people. And I can absolutely relate to that when I've been in front of large groups of people and speaking directly to them. Sometimes if I get to talk to them, like seeing a familiar face or just a friendly face can be so anchoring. And it's like, oh, I'm just gonna talk to this one person, and that one person, and that just kind of grounds me. Oh, my hands are a little sweaty. Okay,
yes. It's like,
that's just where I'm at.
Yeah.
Begin where I am, right?
Exactly. I think that goes so far, because it's easy for our minds to kind of, carry away with those big nervous feelings. So I think the more you can kind of anchor yourself and root yourself in your confidence, the better you'll feel.
I love that. So friends, we have just a little under half an hour left, and we're going to get into some of our questions now. And so if you have any more thoughts, insights, questions, feelings, drop it in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. So in this first half hour, we covered a lot of amazing things to do. And I love this question to kick us off. What are some things you definitely want to avoid doing when networking? Which is a great way to. So we got all this great stuff. What's on this list over here?
I mean, I feel like obviously people talk about, like, if you have a bad experience at any employer, it is very unfortunately common that sometimes you might have had a toxic or difficult work situation. It's not to say that you can't talk about it, but if you're going to talk with someone who you're going to build a relationship with that may be a future colleague or a future hiring manager, you again can say the same thing in different ways. So like, A, is that a topic you need to bring up or want to bring up? Or B, how do you phrase it? And, if they were to say, why did you leave your last role? Or really any sensitive questions like that, where there might have been complexities in the situation, I would just practice with a peer, with a mentor, with a coach. How can I phrase this in a way that serves me? And that can be hard. Like, of course, you never want to lie or embellish anything. But I think there are ways not to sugarcoat, but to still be professional, polite, and clear without needing to disparage or anything. Like, if there was a difficult situation, there's always, takes two to tango. So there could have been your side of the story, another side of the story. There's any number of factors and complexity. So really think about, is this something I need to get into at all? And B, if you do have to answer a question like that, just try to literally practice and workshop it with a friend of like, how can I talk about this situation? And, the beauty of any difficult situation is, especially if it's in an interview or networking, just bring it back to the positive, bring it back to the now, bring it back to like, what are you looking for in your next employer that, will in turn showcase what it is maybe you didn't have in your last situation. So always try to bring it back to the positive. I think that's where things get a little dicey in terms of like what not to do is like, how can you talk about, either sensitive, complex, difficult situations while not showing bad on yourself or showing bad on others, and yet still being somehow clear. These things are not easy to do. Practice with someone. That's kind of the one thing I can think of, but really, there's so many potentially difficult questions, even, talking about a failure or a weakness, really any challenges. Those are opportunities to practice. How can I explain difficult things, right? That's where things get dicey and confusing and stressful and difficult. I'm trying to think if there's anything else you don't want to do.
Well, I love too how you're saying, well, bringing it back to the positive, and in potentially a previous experience that was challenging, and bringing what you are hoping to see in a future employer. It also is, tell me what you think about this, is the opportunity for like, oh, here's something I learned, right? And it's like, oh, this is something I learned from a previous experience. And that's a way of sort of shifting the positive into what you hope for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dicey. It's always good to show self-awareness, but even then, it can be interesting to talk about any situation. And it's not to say, we are human. We do make mistakes. So yes, you should always say how you grew from something, how you learned from something, or better yet, how do you guardrail if it was a mistake you made, how do you prevent yourself, or how do you work on that thing? And how do you make sure that in the future it goes differently? That's even better, because that self-awareness shows that not only did you learn, but you really grew from that thing, and you make sure that it doesn't happen again, type of thing. But yeah, I'm trying to think, Devon, do you have anything that, they shouldn't do?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think the biggest thing is just to remember that this is a professional setting. So, I think that's can kind of guide in terms of when thinking about things not to do. I don't think that's to say that you can't, show who you are or, do anything like that. But I think just remember, it's a professional setting. And like Rachel was saying, I think it can be difficult and it can, be tricky to navigate. But I think the goal of a lot of times of, whether networking or interviewing is to highlight, your value and, what it is that makes you someone who others want to work with and who others want, to be interacting with. So I think the best way to do that is really, just to, like I said, show your value and show, past experiences you've had and, what it is that, makes you who you are. So I think kind of keeping that at the core of, driving your conversations and things like that. That's the most important thing.
And just really quickly, some other things. These are like small little tweaks or tips, more on the what you can do. If you're not confident yet with like communicating, whether it's networking or interviews, first of all, like, and Devon, like, please add to this too, because these are my quick, like, actual speaking tips that will help you. slowing down your speech. I
Mhm.
talk so fast, but and many of us do, but in moments that are kind of like your nervous moments or these important moments or interviews that you're not going to get back again, truly try to slow the pace of how you're talking. And if you notice what I'm doing now, I can better think while I'm speaking versus my typical very quick pace. So that's a
Yeah.
tool that's always in your toolbox. Literally, you slow down. That way, you know you're thoughtful. You know you won't miss anything. You can think of the different words and options you have to say your message. Also, taking a breath and thinking before you dive in. That's a tough habit. A lot of us need to practice. We're not good at that. Practice that. Pause. You can even restate the question. So if they ask you a question, you could be like, great question. I'm happy to tell you about a time when I handled a large global project. To give you one of those examples, I just bought myself a few seconds and I was just thinking, and all I was doing was reintroducing the idea and also restating the fact that I heard their question. You can also ask clarifying questions. If they ask you something and you're not sure and you're hesitant to dive in because maybe you didn't understand what they asked, or maybe there's different ways you can answer it, ask a clarifying question. So remember that you can show up to networking or interviews the same way you would show up to like a work meeting. If you were meeting with colleagues or a client or something, you would communicate in your most strategic way so that you could do the work. It's kind of like that, right? So don't try to not differentiate like, oh, it's so different. Like, picture like a really important meeting at work and it's with some senior person or some client or something. And it's like, how would you show up as thoughtfully as humanly possible? This is really the same. So remember, you're kind of like, it's as if you're showing up to a work meeting versus I think sometimes we feel so nervous because it's like about you and it's about your career path and maybe it's about a job opening or whatever, but it's like, show them who you are at work, right? Which is your most strategic self. You might ask questions, you might, any number of those tools. So you don't have to show up differently. Use all those same best practices that you already know, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
For sure. I love that you brought up pausing too, because I think that's something that a lot of us are, kind of uncomfortable with, when we think about whether interviewing, networking, public speaking too, but don't be afraid of a little silence. It gives yourself truly a beat to gather yourself, gather your thoughts and what it is that you want to say. And it really will help you come across so much more, with more clarity and all of that. So I think using pausing and, just taking a minute is totally okay. And definitely something that's usually underutilized.
The power of the pause.
That's right.
Absolutely. Because when there's a little quiet moment, everybody leans in. They're like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, for sure.
And the amount of thinking you can do in like 2 seconds or 3 seconds, especially in these sensitive moments where you want to be able to answer dynamically and you want to be able to answer clearly and you want to be able to answer comprehensively. Like, it's just so underrated, the pause. Like, how much can go on in your brain? Because you may realize in that pause that like, actually, you need to ask a question. Actually, there's different angles that you could approach it. All of a sudden, they're going to be like, wow, who's that? Versus rushing, jumping in. If you jump in too quickly, you're not letting yourself think fully. And these are those rare opportunities that you want to be as thoughtful as humanly possible, right? You want to walk away being like, I was really slow. I was intentional. I was thoughtful. I did everything in my power to showcase my knowledge. That's what's hard because you're like in the moment and you have to really step up to the plate and you have to show them so much about you, but in a short period of time. The pause really helps you. You don't want to walk away with any regret. So, and I guess I'm alluding a little more to interviews here, but the same goes for networking. That pause, that slowing down, it makes sure that you give off the fullest impression with all of the best of you and your thinking. So in order to showcase your thinking, you have to do your thinking during the meeting, right?
It also invites a moment of confidence, I think. You're just like, you know what? I asked for this time. I'm going to maximize this time. and it shows that you can be comfortable in the space.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much power in that. I love it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because it's not just, yeah, it's how you show up. You are showing your demeanor as a professional. So yeah, I love that. You want to show that confidence. Yeah, that's exactly right. I love that.
Mm. So we were just, there's a lot of great tips in there. Are there other maybe habits or daily habits that folks could do on a regular basis, whether daily basis, weekly basis, that you would recommend, Devon, of just things we can work on? We got a lot
Sure.
of
And
great hot takes from Rachel there too.
yeah, totally. Especially in terms of confidence, just as communicators in general, there is so much power in your nonverbal expression and, kind of what you are doing. I think I, mentioned this earlier too, but what you're doing with your body when you're interacting with someone there's so much that goes with that can really convey that confidence and assuredness and knowledge and all of that. So eye contact is, a huge one. And, especially there's been a lot of recent research on it. I'm not sure if you've heard of Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist out of Stanford, and he looks into this quite a bit. But he had, I think it was him who had a recent paper about eye contact and just the power in it. And really the most natural way to do eye contact is to maintain it for probably about 2 to 3 seconds, then divert your gaze and then come back to it. And that's a really great tool to use when interacting with others. It's not really natural to just maintain eye contact the entire time and not break it. So you want to have that sense of, feeling natural too. But, if you are feeling nervous and you're, kind of having darting eyes a little bit, that can communicate, maybe some nervousness or timidness. So really working on eye contact and, kind of standing in it, like kind of what we said with pausing, it can really give off some confidence and make you feel confident in yourself to kind of stand in what you're saying and, look the person in the eye and use that as a tool to help you. So that's a big one. And also, gestures goes a long way, and just your posture in general goes such a long way. And I think all of these just kind of feed into your subconscious when you are thinking about how you feel about yourself as a communicator. So if you are standing tall with your, shoulders square and your chin slightly lifted, especially if you're public speaking, in front of others, you want to kind of be in that powerful, ready position that allows you to move, laterally and all of that. That's so important, just to communicate that you kind of know what you're talking about and you're there and feeling confident in yourself. So using your posture to your advantage, and then using gestures as a way to really supplement and kind of add a 3D quality to what you're saying, especially on video calls, where obviously this isn't a natural way to communicate. We are not meant to be communicating like this. So it can be hard to add some dynamics to it. But using, gestures as a way to kind of supplement what you're saying is a great way to then, feed into that confidence. And, I think I said this before too, but storytelling, that is such a great way to naturally help you feel more confident in what you are saying. And, it brings out natural facial expressions so that you just add really that compelling piece to communication that makes people want to listen to you. And like you said before, Hunter, like makes people lean in and, really, really, remember you too when you walk away from an interaction. So those are all things that you can use that, just help in terms of confidence, and there's something you can practice, no matter what kind of interaction you're having.
Right. You could practice that with your friends, with your family.
Yeah.
Just try it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think also like just feeling present and mindful in general. Like when you talk about the body language, like I feel like that might stem from a clear and focused mind potentially. I mean, the body and the mind so interconnected, but really self-reflect. Like if you're not feeling good, whether it's in your body or in your mind and feeling focused and present and mindful, it may show up. If you're distracted, right, your meeting or your communication may be as well. So, even just your everyday life, your habits of like, how do you create focus and presence and mindfulness in your day is going to help these meetings go well and go better. And I think on a, day-to-day habits, if you're in a networking moment, a job search phase, practicing out loud. I mean, we've sort of maybe haven't really touched on that, but there's such a balance between like, you don't want to really memorize, but you want to get comfortable with physically, like, how does it feel to either ask these types of questions or answer these types of questions? And if the style of communication of networking or interviews is like slightly different than how you may chat with a friend, how do you get into that muscle memory of how does it feel to tell a story for 2 minutes and not speak for 6 minutes? Or how does it feel to, like, sometimes we rush and we tell too quickly, too little. Sometimes we talk too much. And so the length, the pace, the level, the volume, the intonation. And so you want that muscle memory to feel like normal to you. And that way, if and when you show up to networking or if and when you show up to interviews, you're more worried about what is it I need to say versus, oh, this feels like an alien type thing in my body because I just don't do it often. So like literally every single day, I will tell people, if you're interviewing, practice one interview question out loud a day, or you could practice the tell me about yourself question out loud once a day. Or even say you do it once a day, you're going to end up workshopping it 2 or 3 times in a row. When you start saying it out loud a few times, you're figuring out like, how do I want to phrase this? And how do I get comfortable with, like I said, the length, the pace, all of that. You're not really memorizing. You're just getting comfortable with like, how does it feel? You're going to say it a little differently every single time, but the practice, and then that mindfulness, like those are, Hunter, when you were saying, what can we do on an everyday basis? Those are some other things that can, and the other thing, what Devon was saying was, it's funny, I'm actually not standing right now, but usually for these types of webinars, I'll use my standing desk. So, I've actually gotten a tip way back when I was being coached. If you're doing an interview or something like that, you might, if you're taking it from a phone or even a video, you might want to stand. It helps you sometimes with confidence, with projection. It may or may not be for you, but that is when Devon was saying like, okay, you want your posture, things like that, sometimes standing, or just really thinking about your space. Are you in a quiet space that you can speak at the volume you need to, like really preparing yourself. Do I need to go somewhere else to make sure I can focus and speak at the level I need to speak? And whether you're standing, sitting, those are just small little things to think about.
I love that because it can activate the energy in your body. So you're just a little more upright, maybe you have a chair that you kind of slouch in, or, it gets the body awake again. I also love you were talking about, Rachel, in the everyday things of what we can do. Like you said, you're not memorizing the speech, but as you get more comfortable with it, some of the maybe filler words, the likes, the ums, the uhs, those will probably start to go away as we get more comfortable with tell me about yourself. And that way we can really be focused and clear. I also love the little mindful things that you were talking about too, because there are some things that I practice that I've heard from like mindfulness teachers, whether you do a meditation or whatever your practice is, you can also take moments like, oh, every time I see a traffic light, I'm just going to be present, or a doorknob every time I change a room, just like giving ourselves these little cues throughout the day to just wake up for a second, I find can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So we've talked so many great things here. We have less than 10 minutes left, which is unbelievable. Any advice? Let's see. Oh, here's a really solid one. How do we overcome negative self-talk when building confidence in work? A lot of us have this inner critic, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, first, because this is so common, I think when it comes to, especially with what I do, and I think being able to recognize what it what those thoughts are, why they're popping up. Think about what is the root of like the mental block, the mindset barrier that's getting in the way. Is it this idea of perfectionism, which I see a lot, having feeling like everything I say has to be absolutely perfect and go according to plan? Or is it, imposter syndrome, that you're just, feeling like, oh, I don't belong here. Do I really know enough? Things like that. So I think being able to recognize kind of what it is that's coming up for you. And then I like to take, and this has helped me personally, is taking almost like a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, where you replace those thoughts that are not helpful and are not accurate, and replace them with thoughts that are helpful and are accurate. And this is something I do, with myself. So if I have, some of that negative self-chatter coming up, I think to myself, wait a second, is it helpful for me to be thinking this way? No, the answer is probably no. And then I go further. Is it accurate? And, usually it's not. So how can I replace that thought with something that is, like I said, more helpful and more accurate? And it's a practice, it's something that you have to practice really doing, and kind of being committed to, just improving your awareness around those thoughts, and sitting with, why you're having them. But I think learning how to replace them with more accurate statements goes such a long way.
I love that. I completely agree. Rachel, anything you want to, the negative self-talk creature?
Yeah, it's such a big thing, and it's so common. And I think it's a matter of just truly understanding, like, what is it that actually I'm feeling? Where is it arising from? Because sometimes we have something like, I don't mean to make this like therapy, but sometimes we have an understanding of ourselves that could come from like you were 3 years old, and then we never had a moment to be able to redefine who we are and have our own opinion. And so what is it that truly made you feel that way? It's possible it was one instance that felt really bad when you were younger, and now it's how you view yourself, or it's limiting your view of yourself, or it could just affect kind of you today. And so where does it come from, and what can I do about it? I think action is the best, not like revenge, but action is the best leverage for whether it's anxiety or any sort of hesitation. Because if you're working on it, that might simply mean talking to someone, just literally having a peer, a mentor, a coach, someone where you can at least know that you're trying to understand it. If you're trying to understand it, you will eventually move to being able to overcome or alleviate the feeling. So I think being comfortable and willing to give it the airspace and say, this is the thing I want to get better at, and I want to overcome, and I want to bulldoze through this hesitation, and recognizing that it's just a feeling. And that's something that we can, maybe adapt. Feelings, if it's holding you back, maybe eventually you reframe it, redefine it, have some other feeling eventually in the future. It means that it's adaptable, and it's something we can grow and work on. And getting support is key. If you're in your own head, it's hard. We often spiral it that way. And it's like, getting an outside perspective will get you out of your own way. Right. So I guess I'll leave it there. And I'm sure, Hunter, you want to wrap up, and Devon as well. And just for everyone to know, I'll put my site in here, and please stay in touch. I hope this was helpful. And I know we'll be back in a few weeks as well with another talk with Devon and I.
Absolutely. And if folks want to reach out to you on your website and LinkedIn as well, they can do that. And Devon, there's Devon. Perfect. Look at that. And is a LinkedIn a good way to communicate for y'all as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'll put my link in there. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been such a powerful conversation. I'm really looking forward to the next one, part 2, where we get to go even further deeper in. So Rachel, Devon, I give you a digital round of applause. Thank you so much for making the time today. And friends on the call, thank you for your participation, your active listening, your engagement. I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of it, and I just appreciate all of you on the call today. So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you